Solid rain fell on the street in the quick encroaching dark. As the sun sought refuge within the bosom of cascading hills rising from the slender curve of night's horizon, gloom's heralds began their approach, the arms of her opaque emissaries reaching greedily from the heavens above, rending street signs and shearing roofs as her devouring spell enshrouded the neighborhood's exceptionally lavish homes. Coiffed displays in each yard morphed in twilight's embrace, their colorful ornaments taking on sinister dispositions in the wake of her blanketing shadow. Faint reflections of dim lamp bulbs residing behind undrawn curtains grinned wickedly from car doors along the quiet road, and vast casements, once adorned with intricate scenes of old, now bore anew only the visages of fiends, each stony face warped in turn by the covetous dusk. A boy's footsteps landed heavily on the damp sidewalk. It had not yet broken to a full run, but held an impassioned gait. To a casual observer, he could be driven so simply by the vigor of developing youth, but that was not the cause for his burgeoning haste. He was late. Very late. The boy was unfamiliar with the territory he'd found himself in and would have avoided it entirely under normal circumstances, but when he'd realized he wasn't going to make it home in time for supper, he gambled on the appeal of a prospective shortcut. He was fully aware of the risk that entailed. His father would tan his hide should he be late again, and would certainly tan it worse were his little deviation to be discovered. But the usual path would have taken much too long. From where he was, that is, not from where he was supposed to have been. Damn it, Felipe. Stupid. So stupid. He should have known better than to trust the fisherman's son. Known better than to be pulled into any more of that kid's quixotic schemes. Left to his own devices for long periods of time on account of his father's work, Felipe was constantly searching for new ways to entertain himself, and ideally, make some easy coin in the process. Illegally, more often than not. A couple of times now, the boy had been roped into one of his plans and found himself lodged in what could only be described as generous heaps of trouble, with his father more so than the law, which still went easy on them both, due to their age. His father warned him regularly against taking advantage of such lenience, as things would change dramatically for the pair in just a few short years, but that really compelled the pair to do just that as frequently as possible until they couldn't anymore. Because damn it all, they just always had so much fun together. Until they got caught, that is. He needed as much fun as he could get, but he already knew how his father would feel about that excuse. He stumbled over the steepening terrain, gathering speed as more droplets began to penetrate the outer layer of his thin coat. The rain had intensified, and it wasn't long before the cheap fabric had been soaked through entirely as he felt unforgiving frigidity brush up against his naked flesh. It had been hot that afternoon, and the forecast had shown no sign of either rain nor cold, so why had the weather changed so fast? Damn it, Felipe. The window of his vision narrowed on the concrete in front of him as he willed himself to ignore his growing discomfort, his calves straining with swift devotion as he struggled to ignore a concerningly long string of ominous estates, their dark secrets obscured by iron bars that loomed on the blurred seams of his periphery. As he passed one of these, an imposing but not especially so graven gate of obsidian tone, he could make out a faint cry amidst the downpour's rhythmless drumming. He carried on, but faltered when the cry rang out a second time, then a third, and a fourth. He stopped. It was a small sound, but a sharp one, like that of a child or an animal in distress. Now, accounting for the extreme conditions, he would vastly prefer to ignore such a thing, eager to get home as soon as possible, both to dry off and to stay his father's wrathful hand. But the sound had this particular sort of pathetic quality to it. A jilted resignation that almost seemed to say, "That's it then, isn't it?" It was the sound of abject sorrow, of the pained acceptance of opportunity undiscovered, and of love left unloved. When he stopped, he turned, his neck craning back towards the potential source of the mysterious sound. This inquiry led him to the open foreground just beyond the border mark of the obsidian gate. The characters the gate bore were strange, and just as unfamiliar were the symbols he could discern at the tips of its posts. It was astonishingly dark. We could make out a bluish-tinted jeep parked diagonally, its width obscuring the majority of the yard that might be visible otherwise through the gate's narrow charcoal slats. It was there, pressed against the inside of one of the jeep's over-wide tires, that a puny, crumpled form rested, slouching up against the wet rubber forlornly. It was tiny, almost impossibly so, like one of those novelty gifts where they inscribe the Declaration of Independence on a pebble. Never noticed it was there at all, unless you were looking for it. And then the cry came again, directly from where the creature lay, almost as if it were responding to the direction of his gaze. What could that be? Whatever it was clearly unhappy. Was it injured? Lost? Perhaps it had been separated from its mother and been trapped in the sudden torrent. It had to be young. No possum, cat, or raccoon grew to be such a size. It couldn't be a dog, how it was shaped. That much was obvious. His vision strained against the piercing dark, and he could make out only a black silhouette and grayish-hued chunks of fur and dappled streaks where the faint moonlight had broken through night's leaden veil. From its stance, propped up against the jeep's undercarriage, it looked like it could be almost human. His neck hair bristled at the thought, and he was suddenly overcome with an eerie tingling that began at the very tips of his ears before surging down into his stomach and out from his toes. It was far more chilling a feeling than that of the icy rain which flecked his now sodden persona. The boy felt a moment's deliberation, overridden by a sense of empathetic duty. He was a kind boy of giving temperament, and he knew if he continued on here, he would surely spend a long night wondering about the state of the creature and whether it had arrived at an unfortunate end by means of his heart's hesitation. He scanned the tips of the wall that split the field, as they were certainly more scalable when wet than the gate's metallurgy, and reasoned that should there be cameras, and certainly there were, they would have a tough time making him out in the deluge. Should he be quick, he could be in and out without being noticed. He didn't have a plan per se, but he knew that if he could get to the creature, he could take it in his jacket pocket and carry it somewhere more forgiving. He'd done a similar thing once with a squirrel, twice with a bird, and a creature as small as this should be no different. He had no fear of the thing. He had a way with animals. Wild creatures had always been drawn to what he hoped was his endearing presence and not his appetizing aroma. He hitched a foot into a narrow groove at the base of the wall and pressed up, reaching for the even narrower one above him. A couple pivots later, he found himself in position to vault to the top of the terrace. Easy enough. He found his hold, solidified it against the pressure of the rain, and swung his body to the top of the wall. As he did so successfully, he planted his leg on the opposite side, cradling himself with the leg on the front side, and as he reached with his hand to secure his position, he slipped. Just slightly. And instead of meeting a firm surface to plant his momentum, he overshot it, and his fingers spread on smooth, slick rock. He successfully stabilized against the surprise and for an instant relaxed. Rookie mistake. His torso careened beyond the precipice as his leg followed suit, coming free of its position on the other side of the wall, and his body fell. A roughly 5-foot drop to the dimness below. The boy came to wearily, his head taking a moment to clear before the sequence of the night's events poured back into his mind's eye. It was still raining. It was still night. He was alive, that was good, but what he saw next was not. As he opened his eyes, glistening shiny in the omnipotent black was the unmistakable red of blood, pulling vastly beneath him. He panicked, almost letting out a scream set to wake the dead along with the neighborhood's denizens, but stopped once he realized he felt fine. Still prone, he ran his hands down himself, wincing with each soggy pad as he anticipated a pain that never came. He was fine. Then whose blood? As he asked himself, his head raised, panic replaced by a rippling nervousness which set his teeth chattering, something the icy rain had somehow not yet done. As his gaze rose, it met another. He recoiled in shock, a breathless gasp escaping his lips as a pair of round, pupilless eyes peered back at him through the rain. They were large for the miniature face they were attached to, set in heavy lids covered unevenly by coarse hair. Their massive irises were sort of amber blue and swirled in a way that reminded the boy of the inside of a clock he'd seen many times in his grandfather's foyer. They were strikingly beautiful. The face the eyes belonged to was like a tiny young boy's, but wrinkled heavily, covered with a layer of the same streaked fur that he'd been able to make out from the gate. Its nose was slender, pointed, and its mouth more akin to a hole in a mask than a real one. There were narrow ridges roughly where its ears should have been, and they rose slightly when the boy moved, as if reciprocating the boy's shock. It was cute, in a grotesque sort of way. It hunched over him, tiny hairy legs bent into a squatting position, tiny hairy body unflinching as the boy pushed to his feet. As he rose, he almost slipped again, this time on the pool of blood. The creature stood and looked up at him through the downpour, rain falling into its eyes and mouth. The droplets didn't splash, but vanished, the thing seemingly unbothered by it all. Then the boy felt a pulse emanate from the left side of his head, and when he went to touch the spot, his fingers brushed up against a raised ridge. Oddly, though he could feel the texture with his fingers, he could not feel where his fingers touched his head. He looked down at the creature and picked it up. It was time to go home. The beast hopped onto his outstretched hand and slid into the pocket it was presented. It was time to go home. Yanni! It wasn't until his mother's voice rang through the still dry air in the flat that he realized he was shivering. His mother ran towards him, concern and consternation evident as she flew to his side. "Where have you been, mijo?" His father's voice boomed from the hall. "Yanni!" "Bill, not now. He's soaking wet. Look at him. Here." As she tried to strip his coat from him, moving him towards the bustling fireplace, he stopped her. "Mom, careful. You're gonna hurt him." Without pausing to explain himself to his clearly confused parents, he fished into his pocket and retrieved his cargo, shedding the coat to his mother, who hung it on the rack by the door. His parents gathered to him, his father's anger still plain but overridden by his curiosity. Yanni held out his cupped hands to them and opened. There it was. And when the light reached its face, the thing mewed. His mother's face softened. His father's anger receded, replaced by a gentle warmth. "Well, would you look at that? Where did you find that, Yanni?" He told them, leaving out several of the more problematic details. As he strategically cut his spinning yarn, he realized something. The blood. His clothes would surely be stained despite the rain's best efforts. Had his parents not noticed? His eyes darted to the jacket by the door, dripping plentifully onto the doormat beneath it, but nothing was out of the ordinary. The unmistakable red was nowhere to be seen. And the ridge? Well, don't just leave it. Put it down by the fire. Poor thing's liable to catch pneumonia. He extended his hand to the coffee table and it stepped lightly off his palm, inching closer to the fire. It promptly curled into a ball. Yanni yawned, and it was morning. It was morning. He jolted awake, sitting up tall in bed. His covers lay on the floor and his wet clothes beside them. He was, thankfully, dry as a bone. His hand rushed to his head. He still felt the ridge. Was he still dreaming? He swung his legs out and noticed his pajamas on them. He couldn't remember putting them on, and he couldn't remember going to bed. He stepped out into the hall and heard bustling from the kitchen. But he wasn't ready for what he would see when he got there. His mother stood over the stove, the smell of potato and egg wafting from the hissing pan she tended to. A plate stacked with warm tortillas sat on the counter. His nostrils flared as his stomach rumbled, but he had no want for food. Yanni's father sat at the kitchen table laughing with his sister, her smile beaming radiantly along with his own. Yanni couldn't remember ever seeing him smile like that. He couldn't remember having a sister. She looked to be about 8 years old, with wavy brunette hair like his mother's. Her features were like his own, a mix of both his parents. His parents. Yanni, sit, eat with us. He sat, unable to speak as every hair on his body stood on end. Yanni, mijo, tell your sister happy birthday. His mother smiled at him expectantly. Tiffany smiled at him expectantly. Tiffany. The name was seared in his mind. It was his sister. It was Tiffany. Happy birthday, Tiffany. I love you.